for you? Well, the answer to that is, in the religious mind, well, how would you know without divine permission? If there was no God, wouldn't it be true, as Dostoevsky's Smerdyakov says, that anything was permitted? That's the way the argument goes, is it not? Without this divine supervision, this celestial dictatorship, we might conclude that we'd do anything we liked. Well, if that's true, and I don't believe it is, because many people are perfectly capable of good behavior when no one's looking, and you can't prove to me that that's any less or more likely for an unbeliever than a believer, but put it the other way around. How likely is it that someone would do something really wicked because they did believe in God? Now, everyone here has instantly thought of an example, haven't they, of something absolutely foul that they wouldn't do, that they've recently heard of being done by someone who's a person of faith. As, for example, sending a child with Down syndrome in Iraq, carrying a parcel into a polling station on the first day of the Iraqi elections, not knowing that it was a bomb. I wouldn't do that, and I don't believe in hell. They would do it because the kid is going to go to heaven. If it does this, it may not know it does. It's going Down syndrome. The genital mutilation community is entirely religious. The suicide bombing community is not exclusively, but almost wholly religious. I'm sorry to say that the child molestation community, those whose slogan is "No Child's Behind Left," are pretty determinedly theistic. Don't come to me with morality, please. It's an insult to me, and it's I think a great offense not just to this audience, but to the many, many victims of people who have suffered from this, this false antithesis. How can it be argued, I've got a minute I think now, how can it be argued that something that's on a knife edge for life, it could go either way, that keeping us on the knife edge proves there must be a designer at work? Why would a designer keep us on a knife edge where at any moment our planet might tip to be where the other planets he made were, dead, lifeless, where nothing happens? The knife edge proves a designer? It proves nothing of the kind. And if it wasn't life, it would be death that they'd use for their argument from design. Professor Francis Collins, the man who helped us sequence the Human Genome Project, says that he went for a hike one day in the wilderness. We've all been impressed by nature in our day, as we have by music and by sex and by love and by many other things, to feel that there's a transcendent. But Professor Collins goes and he sees a frozen glacier with the 3 streams of river frozen in a trinity. Nothing can live up there. It's a lifeless thing. And it happens to be a metaphor for Christianity. He falls to his knees and accepts Jesus as he sees this, and he expects us to think that that's an argument and that that's evidence. Well, as I say, scientists or people who claim to be interested in science can believe weird and foolish things. Just be aware that that's the deal you're being offered today. Thanks.
Thank you, Christopher. Jay Richards.
So a couple of things, and I should probably restate my position, since Mr. Hitchens seems to have responded to an argument I did not make, but which he apparently expected. I did not argue that atheists will do bad things and theists will do good things.
You did.
What did I argue, though? This was the argument. In which perspective on the world do the moral truths that we all know most fit? That is a separate question. It's a separate question. What are moral facts, after all, on the atheistic view? The atheistic view metaphysically must finally reduce to something like reality is matter in motion, purposeless matter in motion. It has no purpose or intentions. Our own intentions ultimately reduce to purposeless processes. The theistic view, on the other hand, is that a personal being has existed from eternity, with intentions, with purposes, and in the Judeo-Christian form, a being who is pure goodness and love. It's a separate question whether people who believe in God or some version of God or some perspective of God have acted in accordance with the moral laws, the fundamental truths we all know to be true. That's a different question. We're asking for where the evidence points in terms of 2 competing hypotheses, atheism versus theism. I am pointing out that all of us, those on the stage, and each of you, if you're properly functioning, know moral truths. And I'm asking, Is it the theistic view of the world or the atheistic view of the world that makes the most sense of those truths and that accommodates them the best? That's a separate question. And I think there's also a basic confusion when we're talking about design. When we're arguing for design, there's basically two claims. One is simply that intelligent agents, from time to time, leave markers behind of their activities. Now, we all know this. Mount Rushmore is an empirical marker. That is, it's a marker that we can observe and tell an intelligent agent left that. We recognize that Mount Rushmore is different from the various other rocks and hills in the Black Hills of North Dakota. So we know intelligent activity is detectable. But intelligent design makes a second claim, that those detectable marks of intelligent activity are present in the natural world as well, in the part of the world that we study in cosmology, in astronomy, in biology. It's hard work, but it's an empirical question. And a sneer is not an argument. And guilt by association is not evidence. The question is whether those empirical marks that we recognize every day in our everyday activity as human beings, if those markers of intelligence are available and apparent in nature or not. And it's a second question whether that design is good or evil. And I would be happy to address that question at a later time. But whether the design is apparent is a separate question apart from it. Thank you.
Now, I understand we have some questions on...
No, we're going to pick up from these questions. We have a list of questions, and I also have questions that have been suggested to us by your comments and very, very brilliant points you've both made. I'd like to start with you, Chris, which is a question which is, you pointed out that Einstein said that there are certain laws, physical laws, that never change. That's the glory of them, is that they never change. Who created those laws, or where did those laws come from? Why do those laws exist? How did the laws of thermodynamics and gravity and motion and so forth come about?
Well, the answer to that, as you know as well as I do, is that nobody knows. But suppose that we were to ask the question, which we're bound to, because we are mammals with a pattern-seeking imperative that impels us to ask this. Suppose we were to say, well, someone must have, then the next question would be, well, where does that someone come from? So all you get from this is an infinite regression, which is highly and deeply unsatisfactory. The reason why Einstein's observation that the laws of nature remain so tense, so taut, so perfect, so symmetrical, so in place, so uninterrupted, that it is this undergirding matter that is so miraculous, is that it completely negates the theistic, not the deistic, but the theistic position. In that case, those laws are not suspended because Mother Teresa has interceded for some Bengali peasant, or because someone's prayed to a virgin, or because Muhammad once said that he's flown on a horse on a night journey to Jerusalem. These things cannot occur, and those who think that they do are fooling themselves and attempting to fool others. So it's a question of whether you think it applies to the deistic or the theistic interpretation.
What do you say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to address that question. It's a good one. First, Mr. Hitchens made 2 points, actually. First, to the question, where did what we call the fine-tuning of both the initial conditions and the forces and constants of nature come from? I described this. You can think of the forces you're familiar with, like electromagnetism and gravity. There's other forces like the strong and weak nuclear force. We call those the nuclear force in Texas, but I'm bilingual now. This is a discovery, again, of the physics community. This was not a cabal of creationists in Kentucky that came up with this question. It's called the fine-tuning problem. And I think it's a legitimate question precisely because we know the universe had a beginning. Now, it's simply nonsense to say that saying that it's the result of design is an infinite regress. Because the point is this. We have competing hypotheses. Is the material universe the fundamental reality, or is there a personal cause to the material universe? The claim is not that everything has a beginning in its existence. Every worldview has a fundamental resting point in explanation. Every worldview needs and wants some necessarily or eternally existing reality. Now, the materialist of the 19th century could simply say it was the material universe. That's now off the table. The material universe is a crummy candidate for ultimate explanation precisely because it has a beginning. God, or a designer, is not in the same way a crummy explanation. because we would posit that God is the necessarily existing thing, whereas we know empirically that the natural world is not. So the infinite regression argument fails. Now, to the notion that there's some problem with